Good morning, everyone. It is Sunday morning, and I'm here to hang out with you for a little bit while I do my makeup and talk about stuff. My name is Stephanie, by the way. I kind of forget to mention that sometimes. And this is not a makeup tutorial. I feel like I need to mention that every time because I will be putting on makeup, but I will not be explaining myself along the way. So if you're curious, though, about the products I use, I will be listing them in the description below. And if you enjoy what you're watching, please subscribe. That would be awesome. So I've got a few things on my mind today. It's kind of like a nesting doll of things that I'm going to talk about. I'm going to talk about a broad idea, and then a smaller idea, and then a smaller idea. So hang with me. I will get to my point. Okay, so I've tried to keep it pretty light and encouraging on this channel as much as I can, but I do think that sometimes it's appropriate to address more difficult things that I see happening. And one of those things that I'm seeing is stuff that is happening in the wake of Donald Trump's diagnosis with what he has called this plague. I'm avoiding using the actual words simply because YouTube has been getting very picky about people discussing it. So I'm not going to use the words, but you know what I'm talking about. Anyway, so in the wake of this news, there's been a mixture of responses to the news. Some people have been outright jubilant to receive the news that in their minds, karma has delivered. You know, for months, this plague has been downplayed and dismissed and, and minimized by Donald Trump as being really not that big of a deal, despite almost 210,000 Americans dying from it at this point. And he's continued to, flaunt the rules, requiring masking and so forth. He, at every turn, at every possibility, he has been saying he's not going to do that. And he doesn't do that. He has gone to visit certain places, and unless made to do so, he does not put on a mask because he doesn't feel he needs it. So, hearing that this man was diagnosed or tested positive for this thing that he has dismissed, essentially saying virtually no one is affected by it, despite the over 200,000 people dead from it, despite the long-term effects this disease has on people. I mean, there are people who are sick, when this first started, 8-9 months ago. This is bugging me. Hang on. There we go. And they're still feeling effects from it. Their lung capacity is still not what it used to be, and it might never be what it was before they got sick. And, he is referring to those people as virtually nobody. I do that a lot. But he is referring to people who have been affected by this as virtually nobody, saying virtually nobody is affected by this virus. So hearing the news that he tested positive and that he's in the hospital has caused people to react in a variety of different ways. Some people, as I mentioned, are outright jubilant about it, very, very joyful about it almost. Other people they don't care. They're like, whatever. It was only a matter of time. We knew this was going to happen, so what? Some people are posting prayers for the Trumps, praying that they will have minimal symptoms or no symptoms at all. And then there are some of us, and I'm in this category, who are not necessarily wishing him harm, but who are just saying, you know what, may he reap what he has sown. Now, in a conversation on one of the social media platforms I frequent, I expressed that sentiment, And I basically said, if you're interpreting this as asking for him to be harmed, then you need to be asking yourself, especially if you still support him, you know, why do you still support him? If my saying, may he reap what he has sown, causes you to think, how could you ask for such a terrible thing for him? All I'm saying is, may he reap what he's sown. If he has truly sown good things, as he says he has, and as many people believe he has nothing to worry about. If he has sown harmful things, and he's about to reap that, that's not my fault, first of all. All I'm saying is, may he get back what he's dished out, basically. Now, this was met with an accusation that I am not a loving person, or that I love people only when it's convenient to do so. And this was from somebody who knows nothing about my life. I've never spoken to this person before. I'm not here to defend my words, because my words need no defense. They are what they are, and people can take them or leave them. I really don't care. What I'm concerned about, though, is something I've been concerned about for a while. And that is the purity tests that I see happening in supposedly progressive circles. It has become a very common thing in progressive circles for people to be subjected to a purity test, sometimes without even realizing they are being tested. And then if they don't pass this purity test, it's assumed that they are, in one capacity or another, just not a good person. They're not loving, they're not compassionate, they're not kind, whatever the case may be. And it is so reminiscent to me of the culture that I worked so very hard to get out of. If you know anything about my story, if you've read my book, if you've read my blog posts, if you've heard my podcasts, whatever, you know that I come from a deeply evangelical background. I was raised in an Assembly of God church. My parents are still evangelical. I'm the only one in my immediate family that does not go to church, other than my son. I have not gone to church in a long time, and one of the reasons I stopped is because the expectations of essentially becoming no longer human were very high. And even in the circles that I was raised in, you were not allowed to express emotions that were what many might consider negative. The expressions of anger, unless it was, quote, righteous anger, you know, anger about sin, anger about the way the world is turning its back on Christ and so forth, that kind of anger was okay. But if you were angry at someone who harmed you, then it was said that you were being unforgiving, you were trying to play the role of God, you were not allowing Christ to work through you, and so on and so forth. All kinds of ways of telling the person that their feelings were not valid, that they were not justified in feeling the anger that they felt, and having that anger was sinful. When I see people who, in one capacity or another, present themselves as progressive and present themselves as people who have evolved beyond certain things, and a lot of people that I associate with on social media and in my real life, or in my life offline, I do think social media is real life, but in my life offline, a lot of them are people who come from the same background I did, because our shared trauma kind of, you know, helped us find each other. And they came from a background which, as I mentioned, you know, tried to seriously dictate to them what emotions were acceptable and how, you know, what was acceptable in the form of expression. You know, not only having the right emotions, but also expressing them properly. Those are both very important things. And they were things that the evangelicals to this day take very seriously. They won't come right out and say, we're trying to micromanage your emotions for you, but that's what it was. So a lot of the people that I associate with come from the same background and have experienced a lot of the same things that I have. including the idea that only certain emotions are acceptable and so forth. So we know what that feels like, to be told that, you know, some of your emotions, that some of your natural human emotions are not valid and they're not acceptable. And when I see this happening again in progressive circles, whether it's a progressive Christian circle, whether it's a strictly politically progressive circle, whatever the case is, when I see it happening, I cannot help but be reminded of the evangelicalism that I worked so hard to get myself free from, because it feels the same. It feels identical to being told that certain emotions are sinful and the expression of certain emotions, especially in certain ways, is not acceptable, and I should be ashamed for even feeling a certain way, let alone saying it. I think this is a problem. I could be wrong, but it seems like this is a problem. You know, throughout the election cycle, before Joe Biden was finally declared the official nominee, there were a lot of purity tests given by progressive people to others who, you know, consider themselves in the more liberal or progressive camp. And if the people did not pass those purity tests, they were told, and it wasn't just the political candidates, this was just other voters, were told that, you know, they weren't progressive enough, and that because they weren't progressive enough, their perspectives on things just weren't valid because they didn't pass that purity test. Again, I don't see that it's a lot different from being told by your evangelical church that only certain emotions are permissible, and anything beyond that scope is something that you need to ask God to help you with, because you're feeling things you're not really supposed to be feeling if you're somebody who follows Christ. That's what we were told. And I don't see any difference between that and being told, well, you know, if you were truly as evolved as you like to believe you are, you wouldn't be feeling these things and you wouldn't be saying these things in response to finding out Donald Trump has the plague, or any other news that might be perceived as, you know, responding to it with, you know, may they reap what they sow, might be considered callous. But this is where I have to get into a larger point. Donald Trump is an abuser. There's no two ways about that. He is an abusive person. And I've been in an abusive relationship. I've been in a few of them, but my marriage was an abusive marriage. I lived every day of my life in fear. We weren't together long, thankfully, but the only reason we weren't together was because I finally got scared enough to leave. Now, I lived every day of my life in fear. I woke up every day not knowing what to expect. I was told every single day that the person I was with had the capacity to truly hurt me, and if he felt like it was necessary, that's exactly what he would do. And I was told every day that if I ever was knocked down by this person, I would not be getting back up, that was going to be the end of me. I heard this every single day. And I finally left. It didn't take me long, and I was fortunate to have resources so that leaving was possible. But the point is, I finally did leave. A few years later, you know, I had not seen him since I left. I saw him just a couple more times when I went back to retrieve the rest of my possessions, and I saw him for just a few minutes each time, and then I never saw him again. A few years later, a friend mentioned to me, he was a mutual, you know, at this point just an acquaintance of ours, and she mentioned to me that he was in the hospital. And I thought, well, that's weird. Why didn't anybody tell me? Because at that point, I was still in contact with his dad and his stepmom, because I had my son, and I felt like, well, maybe he needs to know, you know, both sets of his grandparents, and I really tried to have a relationship with them. Because they, you know, at least as far as I could tell at the time, were not the problem. So I called them, and I asked what's going on. And they said, well, we didn't tell you because we didn't want you to worry. We don't really know how this is going to play out, but right now he's in a medically induced coma. To say that I had conflicting emotions about that would be an understatement. Now, you have to understand, so I lived every day of my life with him in fear. I left when I was 7 weeks pregnant. I spent my entire pregnancy feeling afraid because he told me that when he, or after I had my baby, he was going to do everything within his power to take the baby from me. And he told me that via email a few times before we stopped communicating altogether because I took out a protection order. But I spent my entire pregnancy scared, terrified even, and wondering what I could do to protect my child. Because I knew that once he was born, my ability to keep him safe, if his father wanted to be in his life, was going to be minimal at best. And I was terrified. And I went through my entire pregnancy feeling terrified every single day. Anytime a car that I didn't recognize pulled into the parking lot at the apartments where I lived, it was a small apartment building, only 4 apartments, so if it was a car I didn't recognize, that was weird because there weren't a ton of us there and we all had pretty regular visitors. I would get scared because I would think, oh my gosh, you know, he told me if he ever felt like he needed to hurt me, he would, and that I would not live to tell about it. He promised me this again and again and again, and that, you know, so if I saw a car I didn't recognize, I was terrified. And that was a daily experience, or not a daily experience, but just the terror of what might happen was an everyday thing. And that's how I went through my entire pregnancy. Even when I was with him, I was terrified, and that didn't go away just because I left. So when I found out that he was in a medically induced coma because he had multiple heart attacks and a stroke, I had a lot of conflicting feelings. On one hand, I thought, well, this is somebody that at one time I cared for deeply, and he is the father of my child, and I don't want bad things to happen to him. But at the same time, I would be lying if I said I didn't recognize that if something did happen to him, my life would get a lot easier. I wouldn't have to live in fear every day, because as long as he was out there, there was always the possibility that he could just decide that he wanted to be part of my son's life, and he could petition the court, and the odds are that he would win some sort of custody arrangement, and there would be nothing I could do about it. I've seen it play out again and again with women who left abusive partners, that the abuse she experienced doesn't matter. It's about the fact that the other parent wants to be involved. And anybody who's been in an abusive relationship and then had to leave can tell you that. Anyway, so a few days later, I got the news that he passed away. It was strange to know that he was gone, because, like I said, I didn't wish bad things for him. You know, at that time in my life, I was still praying sometimes. My only prayer was, whatever needs to happen, just make it quick. If he was going to wake up and be fine, I wanted him to do it soon, because I did not like knowing what was going to happen. I wanted to know what I had to look forward to. If he was going to pass, I wanted it to be soon, and I wanted it to be painlessly, because, you know, I didn't want him to suffer. So when I heard that he was gone, I had a lot of different feelings, because, you know, that was the father of my child. But what I also felt, and what I did not deny at all, even back then, was I felt relieved. I felt relieved, and I did not feel ashamed for feeling relieved. When you're in an abusive relationship, and you know that person if given the opportunity, can and will hurt you. It's only natural when that person is in a position where they can't do that, for whatever that reason might be. It's only a natural response to feel a sense of relief that they can't do that to you anymore. So that is, all of that is to say, the expressions of relief, or, you know, that karma finally caught up with him, or, you know, whatever less savory responses people are giving to the news that he has the virus and he's in the hospital, they're completely valid, and there's nothing wrong with them. There's nothing wrong with feeling relieved that your abuser is incapacitated, whether that's permanently or temporarily. What it means for you is you get to breathe. You get to have moments of not worrying so much. And that's a perfectly normal, natural, and I would even say healthy response to hearing that someone who harmed you so much can't do it right now. And you don't have to be up at night wondering what they're going to pull, because they're not able to do anything. So I'm getting really tired of reading comments from people saying that anybody who is feeling a sense of, well, anything other than sad and prayerful for him, that they're wrong somehow. Because that's not true. Sometimes, I mean, I think it's better to just be honest about where you are and what you're really feeling. That is more loving to me than putting on a show, pretending to be so sorrowful and so woeful over the demise of someone who has caused people harm. Whether that is an abuser you had in your life who caused you and maybe your children personal harm, or whether that's somebody who's in a position of power who has caused an entire nation harm. I think that it is more loving to just be honest about the sense of relief you feel that they're incapacitated. And Trump, you know, as far as we know, he's not incapacitated, but he is certainly limited right now. And I know that for some people that is like, I can breathe for a second. Of course, we don't know what's going to happen with the election and so forth, and other than it will go forward. But, you know, to tell people who are expressing a sense that, you know, this is something he caused himself by not taking this seriously and by not taking the steps necessary to protect everyone. He did this to himself, and I don't feel sorry for him. I think that's better than saying, you know, than thinking that, but saying, oh, that's terrible, I hope he pulls through and I hope he's okay, and etc., etc. Now, some people might really believe that. Some people might really feel that way, and if you do, slow clap for you. That's not where a lot of us are. A lot of us are feeling that, you know what, he didn't care when people started dying. He continued dismissing it. He said himself he was downplaying it, and he liked downplaying it. And he did that even as, you know, deaths reached into the tens of thousands, and now we're into the hundreds of thousands. And we're going to, the numbers will keep climbing. And he didn't care until it affected him personally. And now he's got, you know, a more gentle tone about it because, you know, it came knocking on his door. But you can bet if he pulls through this, he's still going to be the same vile human being he was before the diagnosis and before his hospital stay and before his treatments. And if he pulls through, he's going to downplay it even more and say, see, I told you, it's not a big deal. So when you have someone like that, it's very hard to say, yeah, that's terrible that he's been diagnosed with that. I really feel bad for him, and I hope he's okay. You know, I would be lying if I said I hope he's okay. And I don't hope that he suffers terribly. I hope exactly what I said, that he reaps what he what he has sown in all of this. There are a lot of people who have suffered horribly from this virus, and a lot of people lost people they love dearly because of this virus. And they lost those people because the man in charge didn't do his job. And this also speaks to the notion of telling people how they should feel to begin with. We don't get to tell each other how to respond to traumatic events. We don't get to tell each other how to respond to national events. Policing other people's emotions is, again, something that as an evangelical I learned to do. I learned it was kind of all of our job. We were supposed to hold each other accountable for these things. And it really gave people a sense that they had the right to tell other people how they were supposed to grieve, how they were supposed to respond to being harmed by someone. In terms of things like domestic violence and so forth, women, men too, but women especially, were told, go home and submit. And if you don't do that, then you're falling outside of God's grace and you're disobeying God's commands, that your husband is the head of the household. You know, and I will say, if men were being abused, they were just ignored altogether, because man up was the notion. You know, and I see that happening in progressive circles too, this idea that people want to police other people's emotions. I've done it, and I'm fortunate that I had a friend who a few weeks ago, during the Democratic National Convention, a friend was expressing some frustration because her candidate did not get the nomination. And I was saying something along the lines of, you know, this isn't helpful. This is where we are now. We have to move forward. And she basically told me, yes, I understand that, and I will be voting blue in December, but please don't police my emotions on this. And I thought, wow, you know what? She's right. She is allowed to feel what she feels, and her feelings are valid, and I have no business policing them. And I apologized and moved on, you know, realized I was way out of line. And I feel like that's the thing that progressives do, especially progressives who came out of these fundamentalist cultures. You know, policing of other people's emotions also feeds into that idea of a purity test. And all that does is harm people. All it does is harm people, and it eliminates the opportunity for conversation. Because when we have determined that someone is not passing this purity test that we've established for them, how can we converse from that point? How can we go forward with that person and have a meaningful, productive conversation with them if we've already determined that they're not pure enough to have anything of value to say to us? It kind of really doesn't work that way, at least not very well. So that's what's been on my mind today, is we need to stop with the purity tests. We need to stop telling people that their emotions aren't valid if they aren't what we think they should feel. We also need to stop telling people who are victims of abuse, which, in terms of Donald Trump, he is a... All right, so I have to make this quick. So I was saying, you know, the reality is Donald Trump has abused a lot of people, and a lot of people are having a trauma response to this news because they have been victims of abuse in other relationships, and it feels like the president is another abuser in their lives. And hearing about something bad happening to him is not something that is necessarily going to be bad news as far as they're concerned. Because I'm running out of space on my camera, I'm going to pause this and finish this look that I'm doing, and I don't even know what I'm doing, and then I'll be right back. And I'm back. Okay, so anyway, back to what I was talking about. I really don't have a whole lot more to say, other than, you know, we really need to stop policing each other's responses to things and assuming that because somebody doesn't respond the same way we would to something, that makes them somehow unloving or not progressive, or any number of other things that progressives have been hurling at each other lately. to dismiss people's responses. It's not helpful. It can be hurtful. You know, people who have not been responding with the greatest of sympathy after getting the news about Donald Trump have been told that they're just being divisive. Well, I think it's pretty divisive to jump all over someone for not having the same response you would. People feel the way they feel for a reason, and those feelings are valid, and it isn't anyone's place to tell someone that what they're experiencing and how they're responding to things isn't valid because it's not something you would do. Understand too that for a lot of people who've been in abusive relationships, this entire presidency has been triggering for a lot of us. And then you have experiences like watching the debate last Tuesday, watching that man just verbally brutalize anyone who tried to talk to him and tried to tell him, you know, you got to play by the rules. This is how we debate as mature adults. And for me, it was very reminiscent of what I've experienced before in abusive relationships, of being told basically that I need to shut my mouth and understand that, you know, the person that I'm too weak to stand up for myself. You know, when he was continually talking over people and just taking every opportunity he could to just be cruel, it was very upsetting to watch because I've experienced that myself in relationships, and that's how it's been for me the entire presidency. It's been very upsetting to watch an abuser not only be given the most powerful, you know, the highest office in the country, but then being told that because he's my president and he was democratically elected, and so on and so forth, that I need to extend, and you know, I need to give him respect, and when he falls on bad times, I need to wish him well, and I need to pretend it's all something it's not, and I won't do that. I would rather be authentic and have people think less of me for honestly expressing my feelings about the matter than to try to do the right thing, do the quote right thing, and be lying the entire time. A long time ago, I stopped trying to do the right thing, and I just decided, you know what, people can take me or leave me. I'm fine either way. I'm gonna be myself. And I just want you to know, whatever you're feeling about what's happening with Donald Trump or anyone else in your life who has harmed you, whatever you're feeling about them, it's valid, and you don't need to apologize. You don't need to pretend it's something it's not. Your feelings are valid, and nobody gets to tell you otherwise. Thanks for hanging out with me today. Have a great day. Be good to yourselves. Be kind to each other. Stay safe out there. And I feel like I've got lipstick on my teeth. Anyway, have a great day, and I will talk to you again very soon. Bye-bye.